Billionaire came home late and discovered what his wife had done to his black, sick adoptive mother. The Tesla Model S pulled silently into the private driveway of the Potomac estate when Kingsley Bills decided to skip the hotel and drive straight home after the emergency board meeting. 36 hours in New York finalizing the merger that would push Bills Global Industries past the $6 billion mark should have left him exhilarated. At 39, the founder and CEO had transformed a basement tech startup into a financial empire that Forbes called the American dream incarnate. But as he shut off the ignition at 2:47 a.m., his exhausted mind wasn't calculating profit margins or stock valuations. It was on the 71-year-old woman who had given him everything when he had nothing. Juliette David wasn't his biological mother, but she had been the only mother that ever counted. When an 8-year-old Kingsley was found sleeping behind a dumpster near Mount Zion Baptist Church in West Baltimore, it was Juliette, a widowed seamstress living on Social Security, who took him home. She worked 3 jobs, mending clothes at the dry cleaner by day, hemming bridal gowns at night, and taking in alterations on weekends, to keep food on the table and dreams in his head. Kingsley loosened his tie and walked toward the side entrance that led through the formal dining room. He planned to check on Juliette, make sure she'd taken her heart medication, and perhaps sit with her while she told him one of her stories about his late adoptive father. The way she used to when he'd come home from school bruised from fights with kids who called him Dumpster Boy. The sound of labored breathing made him freeze in the archway between the dining room and the wine cellar stairs. "I told you to stop whimpering." His wife Lillian's voice sliced through the darkness like broken glass. "Do you think anyone cares about the pathetic noises you're making down here? Please, my medication. I need." Juliette's voice was barely recognizable, reduced to a ragged whisper. The dignified warmth Kingsley had known his entire life, now fractured by pain and terror. "You don't need anything except to remember your place in this house." Lillian's heels clicked against the stone steps. "A sick old woman who should have stayed in whatever slum my husband dragged you from. You think because he's rich now, you're entitled to live like royalty?" Kingsley felt his knees buckle. He gripped the mahogany doorframe to steady himself. Lillian had always been so tender with Mama Juliette whenever he was present, kissing her cheek at Sunday dinners, asking about her health with such apparent concern. For 2 years of marriage, he believed his wife genuinely loved the woman who raised him. "I never asked to live like royalty," Juliette whispered, and Kingsley heard something break in her voice that he'd never heard before. Not when she worked 16-hour days to pay for his SAT prep course. Not when she sold her wedding ring to buy him his first laptop. Not even when doctors told her the stress of raising him alone had damaged her heart. I just wanted to be near my boy. Your boy." Lillian's laughter was venomous. "He's not your boy. He's a charity case you got paid by the state to babysit. The only reason you're here is because Kingsley has some misguided guilt about where he came from. But I'm going to fix that problem very soon." Kingsley moved silently down 3 steps and peered around the corner into the wine cellar. What he saw turned his blood to ice. Juliette sat bound to an antique chair in the center of the stone floor, thick rope wrapped around her wrists and torso. Her burgundy dress, the one he'd bought her for her birthday, was torn at the shoulder. Her medication bottles lay shattered in a pile near the wall, pills scattered across the cold floor like discarded pearls. Bruises darkened her forearms. Her face was swollen, and Lillian stood over her with a glass of wine, looking down at the woman who had raised a billionaire as if she were examining an insect. "Starting tomorrow," Lillian said, taking a slow sip, "Dr. Ashford will examine you. He'll find that your dementia has progressed. You'll be declared mentally incompetent. And then you'll go somewhere appropriate for someone of your condition." She leaned down until her face was inches from Juliette's. "Somewhere far away from my husband and my life. Where you belong." Kingsley backed up the stairs silently, his hands shaking, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He retreated to the garden entrance, stood in the cold December air, and tried to process what he'd just witnessed. A memory exploded in his mind with devastating clarity. Juliette at 47, working the night shift at the bridal shop after a full day at the dry cleaner, telling him as she pinned his corsage for prom, "Baby, You're going to do something big with your life. You're going to rise so high that people will forget you ever struggled. But I don't want you to forget. Promise me you'll never forget where love came from. Now, at 71, with a failing heart and arthritis in her hands, the woman who had sacrificed her health, her savings, and her golden years so that he could dream was bound like a prisoner in the house that her love had built. And the woman he'd married, the woman he'd trusted with his fortune and his family, had turned his mother into her victim. Kingsley pulled out his phone, opened the security app he'd installed 3 years ago and never needed to use, and began scrolling through the archived footage from the wine cellar camera. What he found in the next 20 minutes changed everything. This wasn't the first night. This wasn't even the worst night. This was simply the night he finally came home late enough to see the truth. Baltimore, 1989. The summer heat clung to the cracked asphalt behind Mount Zion Baptist Church like a suffocating blanket. Juliet David, 43 years old and 6 months widowed, took the trash out after Wednesday evening service and found a boy sleeping curled against the dumpster. He was small for 8, all sharp angles and hollow cheeks, wearing a Superman t-shirt 3 sizes too big and jeans held up with electrical tape. His sneakers had holes where his toes pushed through. She should have called the police. That's what Sister Morrison would have said. That's what any sensible woman would have done. But Juliet David had spent 2 decades as a nurse before her husband died, and she recognized the shallow breathing of a child who'd been hungry for too long. She knelt on the dirty pavement in her good church dress and touched his shoulder. "Baby, wake up. You can't sleep here." The boy's eyes snapped open, wild and defensive. He scrambled backward into the dumpster, ready to run. "I didn't steal nothing. I was just sleeping." "I know, honey. I know." Juliet kept her voice soft, the way she used to with frightened patients in the emergency room. "What's your name?" "Kingsley." He watched her with the calculating wariness of a child who'd learned that adults couldn't be trusted. "Are you going to call somebody? I'm going to get you something to eat." "When's the last time you had a real meal?" He shrugged, but his eyes drifted to the church kitchen windows where the women were cleaning up after the potluck. Juliet made a decision that would change both their lives. "Come with me." That night, Kingsley ate 3 plates of macaroni and cheese at her kitchen table in the small row house on Edmondson Avenue. He didn't speak much, just watched her like he was waiting for the trap to spring. When she showed him the guest room, really just a converted storage space with a twin bed, he asked, "How long can I stay?" "As long as you need to, baby." Juliet sat on the edge of the bed. "But tomorrow, we're going to make this official. I'm going to see about becoming your foster mother. Would that be all right with you?" Kingsley nodded, and for the first time, she saw tears in his eyes. "Nobody ever wanted to keep me before." The foster care system made it official 3 weeks later. Juliet's Social Security checks and her late husband's small pension barely covered the bills, so she took a job at Morrison's dry cleaners on the day shift. When that wasn't enough, she added evening alterations at Sylvia's bridal shop. When Kingsley showed an aptitude for math, she took in weekend mending from 3 different churches to pay for tutoring. Every night, no matter how exhausted, she sat with him at the kitchen table, teaching him to read from her late husband's library books. "Education is the only thing they can't take from you," she told him, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "You're going to be somebody, Kingsley Bills. I can feel it." When kids at school called him dumpster boy and trash kid, she held him while he cried and told him, "They're wrong, baby. God doesn't make trash. He makes miracles. And you're mine." She never told him it was hard. Never mentioned the arthritis developing in her hands from the endless sewing. Never complained when her heart started showing signs of strain from the stress and overwork. She just loved him, believed in him, and worked herself to the bone to give him a chance the world had refused to offer. And Kingsley remembered every sacrifice. Every single one. Kingsley waited in the garden until he heard Lillian's heels click up the main staircase, heard the bedroom door close on the 2nd floor, heard the lock turn. Only then did he move. His hands shook so violently it took 3 attempts to get his key into the side entrance lock. The wine cellar door stood slightly ajar, light spilling onto the marble floor like an accusation. Juliet sat exactly where he'd seen her, head slumped forward, breathing in shallow gasps. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the rope had cut into aged skin. When his shadow fell across her, she flinched violently, a small animal sound escaping her throat. Mama. His voice cracked on the word. Mama, it's me. It's Kingsley. Her head lifted slowly, eyes unfocused and glassy with pain. Baby, you're supposed to be in New York. You can't. She'll be so angry if she finds you down here. I don't give a damn what she'll be. He knelt in front of her, his $3,000 suit soaking up wine that had spilled on the stone floor. His fingers worked at the knots, but they were tight deliberately, cruel. Whoever tied these meant for them to hurt. How long have you been here? Since dinner. 6 hours, maybe 7. Juliet's voice was barely a whisper. Kingsley, my medication. She took my medication 3 days ago. My chest, it hurts so bad. The knots finally gave way. The ropes fell to the floor like dead snakes. Kingsley caught Juliet as she slumped forward, her body lighter than it should be, fragile in a way that terrified him. When had she gotten so thin? When had the strong woman who used to carry him on her back become this breakable thing in his arms? He carried her up the stairs, through the silent house where his wife slept peacefully in their bed. Each step felt like a mile. Her breathing was ragged, labored. He took her to the guest wing, to the suite he'd furnished for her with the best of everything: silk sheets, an adjustable bed, a private bathroom with a walk-in tub. All of it meaningless if she was being tortured when he wasn't looking. In her bathroom, he found the evidence he'd been dreading. The medicine cabinet stood empty, its contents swept away. Pills scattered across the floor behind the toilet like discarded confetti. Her blood pressure medication, her diuretics, her digitalis. He gathered them with shaking hands, checked the labels, tried to remember the dosages from the list her cardiologist had given him 6 months ago. Take these, Mama. He held the pills and a glass of water to her lips. When did you last eat? Yesterday morning. She said I wasn't allowed in the kitchen anymore. Juliet swallowed the medication, wincing. Kingsley, baby, listen to me. You need to let this go. Your marriage, your life, don't destroy it for me. I'm old. I am sick anyway. Just let me go back to Baltimore. I'll figure something out. Stop. He pulled a chair beside her bed and took her bruised hands in his. Do you remember what you told me when I wanted to quit school because kids were calling me names? You said, Bill's men don't run from bullies. They stand up. They fight smart. That was different. It's exactly the same. He looked at the woman who'd saved him, really looked at her. The weight loss, the fear in her eyes, the way she flinched at shadows. This hadn't started tonight. This had been going on for weeks, maybe months, while he'd been too busy building his empire to notice. I'm going to fix this, Mama, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Juliet searched his face and slowly nodded. Good. Tomorrow morning, when Lillian wakes up, I'm going to act like I just got home, like I don't know anything, and you're going to pretend everything is normal. Can you do that? Yes. Her voice strengthened slightly. I can act. Kingsley kissed her forehead and stood. He had surveillance footage to review, lawyers to call, and a wife to destroy. But first, he needed to see exactly how deep this cruelty went. Kingsley's home office occupied the entire 3rd floor of the East Wing, a glass-walled sanctuary where he'd built Bill's global industries from concept to empire. Now, at 3:47 a.m., he sat in the dark before 6 monitors, his fingers moving across keyboards with the muscle memory of someone who'd coded his first algorithm at 14 in Juliet's cramped rowhouse kitchen. The mansion security system was a relic, installed by the previous owner in 2008 and supposedly deactivated when Kingsley had the property rewired 3 years ago. But supposedly wasn't the same as actually. He discovered the dormant cameras during a routine network audit 18 months back and left them running out of pure tech nerd curiosity. Now, that forgotten paranoia was about to expose a horror show. The first file loaded at 4:02 a.m. September 17th, kitchen, 6:35 p.m. Lillian stood at the island arranging cheese on a platter while Juliet worked at the stove, stirring something in a pot. Normal. Domestic. Then Lillian's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled, and walked to the stove. What she did next made Kingsley's stomach turn. She lifted the pot Juliet had been cooking and dumped the entire contents into the garbage disposal. What are you doing? Juliet's voice, confused but not yet afraid. That was my dinner. Was it? Lillian's smile never wavered. I don't remember giving you permission to cook. Old people with dementia shouldn't be near hot stoves anyway. You could burn the house down. I don't have dementia, Dr. Chen said. Dr. Chen doesn't live here. I do. And I think you're confused, Mama Juliet. Maybe you should skip dinner tonight. For your own safety. Kingsley fast-forwarded through 17 more files. October 3rd. Lillian accidentally spilling scalding coffee on Juliet's hand, then refusing to let her treat the burn. October 19th. Forcing Juliet to scrub the marble entryway on her hands and knees while hosting her book club, the women stepping around her like she was furniture. November 2nd. Locking her in the wine cellar for 6 hours because she'd asked when Kingsley would be home. The worst file was dated November 28th, Thanksgiving. Kingsley had been in Singapore closing a deal. The footage showed Juliet setting the formal dining table, her movements slow and careful, arranging his grandmother's china with arthritic hands. Lillian appeared behind her, watched for a moment, then swept her arm across the table. Porcelain exploded against hardwood. Juliet flinched, tried to kneel to clean it, and Lillian grabbed her by the hair. You stupid old woman. That china was priceless. You're going to cut yourself picking that up with your shaking hands, and then I'll have to explain to my husband why his precious mama is bleeding all over the place. She released Juliet, so suddenly the older woman fell. Leave it. I'll tell Kingsley you had one of your episodes. That you threw the dishes yourself. Kingsley watched his mother pull herself up using the table edge, watched her silently leave the room, watched Lillian pull out her phone and text someone. Phase 2 tomorrow. Doctor's coming to evaluate. This will all be over soon. He closed the laptop and sat in darkness, calculating. He'd built a billion-dollar empire by thinking 3 moves ahead of everyone else. Now he needed to think 10 moves ahead. Because his wife wasn't just cruel. She was organized, methodical, and planning something that involved doctors and evaluations. Something that would make Juliet disappear permanently. His phone was in his hand before he'd consciously decided to move. The first call went to Diane Shun, a former FBI agent who now ran the most discreet investigation firm in D.C. She answered on the second ring. Diane, it's Kingsley Bills. I need you to find out everything about my wife. Everything. And I need it yesterday. Diane Shun had spent 12 years with the FBI's white-collar crime division before trading her badge for the more lucrative world of private investigation. She'd infiltrated drug cartels, corrupt corporations, and money laundering operations. But nothing had prepared her for the Potomac Pearls. It took her exactly 4 days to get inside. A carefully manufactured identity as Christine Zhang, wife of a fictional hedge fund manager, complete with a rental mansion in Georgetown and a backstory about old Singapore money. An engineered encounter at the Saks Fifth Avenue jewelry counter where Lillian was selecting a bracelet. A casual mention of the charity gala circuit. By Thursday, she had an invitation to the Pearls' weekly brunch at the Watergate Hotel. 5 women sat around a private dining room table, mimosas untouched, speaking in the clipped tones of those who believed their wealth made them untouchable. Lillian Bills, Catherine Whitmore, wife of a defense contractor, Alexandra Hartley, married to a Supreme Court justice, Priya Kapoor, whose husband owned half the commercial real estate in Northern Virginia, and Vanessa Chun, no relation, whose tech mobile husband had just taken his company public. Diane sipped her water and played the eager newcomer. I'm so grateful you included me. I've been looking for women who understand the unique challenges of our lifestyle. Unique challenges. Lillian smiled, and Diane recognized the predatory gleam she'd seen in dozens of sociopaths. That's one way to put it. Tell me, Christine, does your husband have any elderly relatives living with you? His mother. She's 73, has early dementia. The lie came easily. She's becoming quite difficult to manage. The women exchanged glances. Catherine leaned forward. How difficult? She keeps asking to see her lawyer. Talking about changing her will. My husband won't hear of putting her in a facility, of course. He's absurdly sentimental about her. Diane let frustration color her voice. Meanwhile, she's sitting on a trust worth $8 million that could be put to much better use. Lillian's smile widened. We might be able to help with that. What followed made Diane's blood run cold. These women had turned elder abuse into a coordinated business model. They'd found doctors willing to falsify dementia diagnoses for the right price. Lawyers who specialized in emergency conservatorship. Psychiatric facilities that asked no questions as long as the checks cleared. They shared strategies like other women swapped recipes. The key is isolation, Alexandra explained, scrolling through her phone. Cut them off from their support systems first. Fire their personal doctors, screen their calls, intercept their mail. By the time you have them evaluated, they're so disoriented that the diagnosis writes itself. Priya nodded enthusiastically. And document everything. Small accidents, medication mix-ups, episodes of confusion. Build a paper trail that proves they're incompetent. I had my mother-in-law declared unfit in 6 weeks. What happened to her? Diane asked carefully. Evergreen Hills. It's a private facility in West Virginia. Very discreet. Very secure. She stopped being a problem after that. Priya's tone suggested the woman had simply ceased to exist. Vanessa pulled out an iPad. We have an encrypted chat. Signal app. Messages set to auto-delete after 24 hours. We share resources, recommendations, legal contacts. The group is invitation only. Very selective. Lillian touched Diane's hand. We call ourselves the Potomac Pearls. Because we understand that sometimes, to protect what's valuable, you have to be ruthless. Her eyes glittered. My husband's adoptive mother is being evaluated tomorrow. By next week, she'll be out of my house permanently. Would you like Dr. Ashford's contact information? Diane smiled and accepted the business card, her mind already calculating how many laws these women had broken, how many elderly people had vanished into facilities, how many families had been destroyed. She excused herself to the bathroom, locked the door, and texted Kingsley. It's worse than we thought. This is organized. Multiple victims. Need FBI immediately. Dr. Gerald Ashford maintained an office in Chevy Chase that looked more like a gentleman's club than a medical practice. Mahogany panels, leather furniture, abstract art that cost more than most people's cars. His patient list read like a who's who of Washington's elite, and his fees reflected his exclusivity. Kingsley had never questioned why Lillian insisted they use her family physician instead of his own doctors. Now he understood. The forensic accountant Kingsley hired, Robert Kim, delivered his findings at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, 48 hours after Diane's text from Watergate. They met in Kingsley's office, door locked, phones off. Robert spread bank statements across the desk like autopsy photos. 3 wire transfers from an LLC registered to your wife. First payment of $50,000 on September 1st. Second payment of $100,000 on October 15th. Final payment of $100,000 on November 30th. All deposits into an account held by Dr. Gerald Ashford. Robert tapped the papers. The LLC is a shell company. The money ultimately traces back to your joint accounts. Kingsley studied the dates. September 1st was 2 days after he'd left for that tech conference in Austin. October 15th was the weekend he'd gone to his alma mater for the alumni fundraiser. November 30th was yesterday, the day before he was supposed to be in New York. Each payment timed perfectly to his absence. What was he being paid to do? Robert slid another document across the desk. Medical records for Juliet David. Dated November 28th, signed by Dr. Ashford. They indicate advanced dementia with episodes of violent behavior, paranoid delusions, and inability to care for herself. He recommends immediate psychiatric intervention. Kingsley read the words and felt rage build like pressure behind his eyes. Juliet had been evaluated by her actual cardiologist, Dr. Sarah Chun, just 6 weeks ago. Her mind was sharp as ever. Her only health issues were cardiac, manageable with medication and monitoring. This document was fiction, purchased fiction, designed to erase her autonomy. There's more. Robert pulled out his laptop. I accessed Dr. Ashford's email. He's been corresponding with Whispering Pines, a private psychiatric facility in rural Virginia. They specialize in what they call extended care for challenging patients. Translation: they warehouse people whose families want them to disappear. The emails made Kingsley's stomach turn. Lillian had toured the facility 3 times. She'd requested a private suite in their secure wing, the section reserved for patients deemed dangerous to themselves or others. She'd specified that Juliet was to have no unsupervised communication, no visitors without her explicit approval, and a medication protocol that included heavy sedation. How heavy? Kingsley's voice was barely audible. Robert hesitated. The protocol she requested would keep a patient essentially catatonic, unable to speak coherently, recognize visitors, or advocate for themselves. Dr. Ashford signed off on it as medically necessary. One email stood out, sent from Lillian to Dr. Ashford at 11 p.m. on November 29th. My husband returns tomorrow. The evaluation must happen immediately after. Have the commitment papers ready. Once she's at Whispering Pines, she becomes their problem, not mine. Make sure the sedation starts day 1. I don't want her lucid enough to cause trouble. Kingsley closed the laptop carefully, afraid he'd put his fist through the screen. Juliet hadn't just been a victim of abuse. She'd been marked for medical kidnapping, for chemical lobotomy, for a living death in a facility designed to make inconvenient people vanish. The appointment with Dr. Ashford was scheduled for today at 2 p.m. Lillian believed Kingsley was still in New York, unreachable, unaware. She believed she had hours left to execute her plan. She was wrong. Kingsley picked up his phone and called his attorney. James, I need emergency legal intervention. I'm stopping a medical fraud in progress, and I need law enforcement standing by. He glanced at the clock. 8 hours until the appointment. 8 hours to dismantle everything. And James? Give me everything on Whispering Pines. Patient complaints, licensing records, lawsuits. I want that place investigated down to its foundation. Robert Kim returned to Kingsley's office on Sunday morning with a manila folder that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. You're going to want to sit down for this. Kingsley was already sitting, hadn't really left his chair since yesterday. 3 days without sleep had turned his vision grainy, but his mind remained laser-focused. Just tell me. The Juliet David Educational Foundation. Your wife has signature authority as co-founder and treasurer. Over the past 18 months, she's systematically looted it. Robert opened the folder, revealing spreadsheets color-coded in red. Total embezzlement, $4.7 million. The foundation was Kingsley's proudest achievement outside of his business empire. He'd established it 5 years ago with an initial endowment of $20 million, designed to provide full scholarships to foster children pursuing STEM degrees. Kids like he'd been. Kids sleeping behind dumpsters who just needed someone to believe in them. He'd named it after Juliet because she was the reason any of it existed, and Lillian had been stealing from it. Where did the money go? His voice sounded hollow, distant. Robert flipped through pages. Shopping primarily. Hermes, Cartier, Bulgari. $300,000 at a single Chanel boutique in Paris last spring. But that's not the worst of it. He pulled out bank statements. Wire transfers to Marcus Holloway. $50,000 a month for the past year. $600,000 total. Who's Marcus Holloway? Lillian's personal trainer. Also her lover. Robert showed him photographs pulled from a private investigator surveillance. Lillian and a man in his 30s entering the Four Seasons in Georgetown. The same man leaving her car in the parking garage of an Arlington condo. He has a severe gambling problem. Online poker, sports betting. Your foundation money has been paying his debts. Kingsley stared at the photos and felt something cold settle in his chest. She'd been cheating on him with foundation money while planning to erase his mother from existence. The cruelty had layers he was still discovering. There's more. Robert's expression darkened. Payments to the other Potomac Pearls members. Catherine Whitmore received $200,000 in consulting fees for helping Lillian establish the LLC used to pay Dr. Ashford. Alexandra Hartley got $300,000 labeled as legal services, but there's no evidence she provided any legitimate work. Priya Kapoor was paid $400,000 as a real estate consultant around the same time Lillian was researching Whispering Pines. She used my mother's foundation to fund a conspiracy to destroy my mother. Kingsley said it aloud, testing whether the words made more sense spoken than they did in his head. They didn't. Robert nodded grimly. The foundation was supposed to help 43 students this year. Because of the missing funds, you'll only be able to support 19. 24 kids who qualified for scholarships will have to find other options or give up on college entirely. That detail cut deeper than anything else. Somewhere out there, a kid sleeping behind a dumpster had gotten a letter saying their dreams were possible, only to have those dreams stolen by a woman who bought $12,000 handbags with money meant to save them. Can we recover any of it? Some. The gambling debts are gone. The shopping sprees are spent. But we can freeze the LLC accounts, file criminal charges, pursue civil recovery. You'll get maybe 40% back if we move aggressively. Robert closed the folder. Kingsley, this is wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. Federal crimes. She's looking at decades in prison. Kingsley stood and walked to the window overlooking the grounds where Juliet used to tend her rose garden before Lillian forbade it. Dawn was breaking, pink and gold over the Potomac. In 8 hours, Dr. Ashford expected to evaluate Juliet and sign commitment papers. In 8 hours, Lillian expected her problem to disappear. Instead, Kingsley was going to make sure Lillian's entire world disappeared. File everything. Contact the FBI. I want her arrested the moment she tries to have my mother committed. He turned from the window. And Robert? Make sure every dollar we recover goes directly to those 24 students. They've waited long enough. Sunday afternoon, sunlight filtered through the bare branches of the rose garden like broken promises. Kingsley found Juliet sitting on the stone bench near the fountain, the one she used to visit every morning before Lillian declared the garden off limits. She looked small against the weathered stone, wrapped in a cardigan too thin for December, her hands folded in her lap like a child waiting to be scolded. Manga. He sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. When did she tell you that you couldn't come out here anymore? Juliet's fingers twisted together. October, maybe. She said the gardeners needed privacy to work. That was getting in their way. Her voice was soft, defeated in a way that shattered him. It's all right, baby. It's just a garden. It's not just a garden. Kingsley gestured at the roses she'd planted herself 3 years ago, the ones she'd tended every morning, deadheading blooms and humming hymns from Mount Zion Baptist. This was yours. She took it from you. She didn't mean. Stop. The word came out sharper than he intended. He softened his tone. Mama, I know everything. The wine cellar, the medication, Dr. Ashford, Whispering Pines. All of it. Juliet went very still. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. How long have you known? Since Friday night. Well, I came home early and found you tied up. She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. You weren't supposed to see that. You weren't supposed to know. Baby, please just let it go. Your marriage is more important than what? Than you. Kingsley took her hands, careful of the bruises still healing on her wrists. Mama, she was going to have you committed tomorrow. Locked away in a facility where they'd drug you until you couldn't remember your own name. She was going to erase you. I know. The admission was barely a whisper. I heard her on the phone with the doctor last week. I've known for a while what she was planning. Then why didn't you tell me? The question came out raw, anguished. Why did you let go on? Why did you protect her? Juliet looked at him with eyes that had seen him grow from a boy sleeping behind dumpsters to a man worth billions. Eyes that had never stopped seeing him as her miracle. Because you loved her. Because you were happy, or I thought you were. Because I'm 71 years old with a bad heart, and you're 39 with your whole life ahead of you. She touched his face with a trembling hand. Baby, don't ruin your marriage for an old woman. I've lived my life. Let me go quietly. Just take me back to Baltimore. I'll find a little apartment, and you can visit sometimes, and you can keep your wife and your life. And, no. Kingsley pulled her into his arms, held her the way she'd held him 1,000 times when he was small and broken and convinced the world had no place for him. You don't get to sacrifice yourself anymore. You've done that enough. Kingsley, do you remember what you told me when those boys cornered me after school? When they were going to beat me up because I wore secondhand clothes. You said, baby, love isn't just kind words and warm feelings. Real love protects. Real love stands between the people it cares about and anything trying to hurt them. His voice cracked. You stood between me and the whole damn world, Mama. Every single day. You work yourself sick protecting me. Now it's my turn. Juliet sobbed against his shoulder, decades of strength finally crumbling. I'm so tired, baby. I'm so tired of being scared in that house. I know you are. He held her tighter. But you're never going back there. Tomorrow, Lillian's world ends. And you're going to be free. They sat in the garden until sunset painted the sky the same pink gold he remembered from Baltimore mornings, when Juliet would wake him for school with hot breakfast and fiercer love than the world had any right to expect from a woman who had every reason to be bitter. You taught me that love protects, he whispered. Now let me protect you. Lillian wore red on their 7th anniversary, a Valentino gown that cost $18,000 from the foundation's stolen millions, though she didn't know Kingsley had discovered that yet. She looked radiant in the candlelight of their formal dining room, her smile perfect as their private chef served the first course. She'd planned this evening meticulously, the menu, the wine pairing, the lingerie waiting upstairs. Everything designed to celebrate what she believed was her greatest victory. To us, she said, raising her champagne glass. 7 years. Here's to 7 more. Kingsley touched his glass to hers, his expression carefully neutral, to the truth finally coming to light. She didn't catch the edge in his voice, too pleased with herself to notice. I'm so glad you came home early from New York. I missed you. The lie came easily to her, smooth as silk. Where's your mother tonight? I haven't seen her all day. She's somewhere safe. Kingsley set down his glass. Somewhere you'll never touch her again. Lillian's smile flickered. What are you talking about? Eat your dinner, Lillian. We'll get to that. They ate in tense silence through 3 courses, her confusion growing with each passing minute. She kept glancing at him, trying to read his face, her confidence beginning to crack. By the time dessert arrived, chocolate souffle, her favorite, her hands were shaking slightly. Kingsley waited until the staff had left the room. Then he pulled out his phone and dimmed the lights. The dining room wall lit up with projected footage. September 17th, 6:35 p.m. Lillian dumping Juliet's dinner into the garbage disposal. The audio was crystal clear. What is this? Lillian's voice went shrill. Where did you get? Keep watching. October 3rd. The scalding coffee. October 19th. The book club humiliation. November 28th. Thanksgiving. The shattered china. Juliet on the floor. The footage played chronologically. A curated highlight reel of months of systematic torture. Lillian's face drained of color. Her breathing shallow and rapid. Turn it off. Kingsley, turn it off right now. Instead, he switched to documents. Bank statements showing the wire transfers to Dr. Ashford. The fraudulent medical records. The Whispering Pines correspondence detailing sedation protocols. The foundation embezzlement. Every stolen dollar highlighted in red. Then came the photographs. Lillian and Marcus at the Four Seasons, kissing in his car, entering the Arlington condo where she'd spent foundation money on their affair. Stop it. She lunged for his phone. He pulled it away easily. The Potomac Pearl's WhatsApp chat. He continued calmly, pulling up screenshots. You were very thorough in documenting your conspiracy. Alexandra, Catherine, Priya, Vanessa, they're all being arrested tonight. Right now, actually, Diane Chin sends her regards. She was never Christine Zhang, by the way. Former FBI. She recorded everything. Lillian backed away from the table, her heel catching on her gown. You can't do this. I'm your wife. We can fix this. I'll apologize to your mother. You were going to erase her. Drug her until she forgot her own name. Lock her away to die alone. Kingsley stood, and she flinched from the cold fury in his eyes. You stole from children. From foster kids who needed those scholarships. You used my mother's name to fund your conspiracy to destroy her. It wasn't. I didn't mean. The front door opened. Footsteps in the foyer. Multiple sets, purposeful and heavy. FBI agents appeared in the archway, badges displayed, weapons holstered but present. Kingsley looked at his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife, as she realized her perfect evening had become her final moment of freedom. Happy anniversary, Lillian. Agent Sarah Morrison stepped forward with handcuffs. Lillian Bills, you're under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, and fraud in relation to medical care. You have the right to remain silent. Lillian's screams echoed through the house as they led her away. But Kingsley had already turned his back. He had a mother to check on, scholarship students to call with good news, and a foundation to rebuild. The house felt lighter without her in it. The Second Chances Elder Care Center occupied an entire city block in West Baltimore. 3 stories of warm brick and wide windows that let sunlight flood every room. It stood exactly 4 blocks from Mount Zion Baptist Church, close enough that residents could hear the Sunday morning hymns drifting through the neighborhood. Kingsley had purchased the abandoned warehouse 18 months ago and spent $12 million transforming it into something his mother had dreamed about for years but never dared to ask for. Sunday morning found him walking through the garden behind the center, past raised beds where residents grew tomatoes and herbs, past the gazebo where poetry readings happened on Thursday afternoons. Juliet sat on a bench near the back fence, her sewing basket beside her, working on a quilt with 3 other women. Her laugh carried across the garden, rich and full in a way he hadn't heard in years. Mama. He kissed the top of her head, gray hair neatly braided, her face fuller now that she ate 3 meals a day without fear. How was your week? Busy. We had 5 new residents, all of them needing everything. She set down her needle and took his hand. There's a woman, Margaret, 78 years old. Her daughter had been locking her in the basement. Social services found her last Tuesday. She hasn't spoken yet, but yesterday she sat with me while I hemmed curtains for the new wing. Just sat and watched. That's progress, baby. They walked together toward the far corner of the property, where a small plaque marked the spot. On this ground, August 1989, Juliet David found Hope sleeping behind a dumpster. Below that, in smaller letters, love sees what the world overlooks. It was the exact location of the old Mount Zion parking lot. The dumpster long gone, but the memory permanent. Kingsley had bought this entire block specifically because of what happened here 34 years ago. A woman with barely enough for herself had seen a throwaway child and chosen love. Do you ever regret it? He asked, not for the first time. Taking me home that night? Your life would have been so much easier without. Don't you dare finish that sentence. Juliet squeezed his hand hard. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. You still are. They sat on the bench he'd installed, watching residents tend the garden. Juliet had recovered fully, her heart condition managed with proper medication and supervision. She ran the center's sewing program, teaching skills to residents who wanted purpose and dignity. The walls were covered with quilts they'd made together, each one telling a story of survival. I got a letter from one of the scholarship students yesterday, Kingsley said. Maya Rodriguez. She's graduating MIT next month. Wants to work on affordable housing technology. He pulled out his phone, showed her the photo of a young woman in a lab coat, grinning at the camera. She wrote that she'd been sleeping in her car before the foundation scholarship came through. She said you save her life without ever meeting her. Juliet studied the photo, tears in her eyes. That's what love does. It multiplies. You give it to one person and they pass it on, and it grows bigger than you ever imagined. Lillian was serving 15 years at FCI Alderson, her appeal denied, her name permanently attached to the largest elder abuse conspiracy in Virginia history. The Potomac Pearls have been dismantled, their members scattered across various federal facilities. Dr. Ashford had surrendered his medical license and faced criminal charges. Whispering Pines was under investigation, its administrators facing lawsuits from families who'd lost loved ones to its sedation protocols. But sitting here in the Sunday morning sunlight with his mother's hand in his, Kingsley didn't think about them. He thought about the 73 residents inside who'd been given second chances. He thought about the 43 students currently on scholarship, building futures from nothing. He thought about the woman beside him who'd taught him that wealth without compassion was just numbers on a screen. You know what I learned from all this, Mama? He held her hand the way she'd once held his on that first night in her row house kitchen. When he'd been terrified, she'd send him back. That the only thing worth building is what protects people. Everything else is just noise. Juliet leaned her head on his shoulder. You always were a smart boy. Took you long enough to figure that out. They sat together as church bells rang across Baltimore, in the exact spot where love first found a boy the world had thrown away, and taught him that being precious had nothing to do with where you came from and everything to do with who chose to see you.